Let's talk about how this testing program came to be. I think you indicated that it started in the early 90s,
In the early 1990s, correct.
and the program that you administered, who developed that program?
So I developed a program.
Did you receive any assistance from any other coaches or athletes in the initial development of the program?
So initially it was mostly books and research, and then I did confer with a strength coach we had at the school at the time.
All right. When you say initially it was research, who performed that research?
I did.
And what types of research methods did you use?
Well, back in the 1990s, it was primarily library books, fitness magazines, things along that nature. There really wasn't a lot out yet.
Okay. Over time, did you perform any other research beyond reviewing hard copy materials?
There was some, like I said before, some books and some online material that I would use to do height and weight predictions and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Did you ever take any formal instruction or undergo a course for purposes of learning how to administer the testing program?
I did not.
How many years total would you say this program went on for?
If it started, the question is when it started. It was as early as 1990, at least 28 years.
All right. And over the course of 28 years, how many students or athletes do you estimate participated in the program?
Over 600.
Did the number of students involved in the program at any given time change over time?
Yes.
In the beginning, early years of the program, how did the population of participants change from the population of participants, say, 10, 15, 20 years into it?
Yeah, so early on, because I was a football coach at the school, it was more football players than anything else. And then later on, to the point when I returned back to the school in 1997, it became more sports, basketball, football. Then and more athletes would be interested in the program.
At the height of the program, how many students would you say would be involved in testing in a given year?
I would estimate about 30.
And for the overall general testing program, how frequently were you seeing the athletes?
So every 3 months or quarterly.
And why did you pick that time period for purposes of seeing athletes?
So the research that I went through said that was a good estimate of time. From my days of weightlifting, I remember something my coach used to say, which was 6 weeks to show, which if you were lifting weights, after 6 weeks, it would actually show on you. So doubling that number was 12. I thought 3 months was a good place to go.
At some points in time during the life cycle of the program, did you test athletes more frequently than quarterly?
I did.
And what period of time would you say that took place?
Sometime around 2001 and 2002 for a couple of years. It was mostly basketball players.
And how did the testing change during that time period?
That was just a monthly test. They would come in every month and we would test their adductor muscles.
And the athletes that you were seeing monthly during that time period for testing, would you also see those same athletes on a quarterly basis?
I would.
So just so I understand, when you elected to do the monthly tests, you limited it to basketball athletes?
Yes.
And when would you say this began?
2001, 2002.
And when would you say the monthly testing for this population of athletes ended?
As far as my recollection, would be about 2005. Obviously, some of the kids would graduate in that process too, so they weren't doing it the whole time.
You said at the height of the program, there were about 30 athletes in it on a given year.
Correct.
And I know you already said that you'd see them on a quarterly basis, but would it be a situation where, at the beginning of a particular quarter or an end of a particular quarter, you would scurry to line up all 30 kids for testing, or did you have some other method that you used for purposes of getting everyone through the process?
So over time, this changed. At the start, it was actual note to the homeroom teacher, and then that note would say, please come set up a testing time. If you are no longer interested, please let me know. And then it would go from there to emails. I would send them an email, and then it would end up being to text messages at the end. It just seemed easier for them. Some of the students would even have their parents. They would prefer that I send the email to their parents because they said I would forget, I wouldn't get it. So a lot of times I was sending emails to parents.
Were you testing the total population of athletes in the program within the same time period of each quarter, or did you spread it out over time?
Since it was about 10 a month, I tried to spread out, but usually if you could get 2 people in a day, it was good.
All of the consent forms spell out that the program was voluntary.
Correct.
Do you maintain that to be true?
I do.
Was there ever an occasion where you offered any benefit or promise of reward to an athlete in exchange for participation?
Never.
Was there ever occasion where you ever communicated some threat of punishment or adverse consequence for an athlete that didn't want to participate?
No.
Did you ever have occasion where somebody would start out in the program and then decide they didn't want to do it anymore?
Yes.
Was that a problem for you?
Not a problem at all.
Did you-
Sometimes it was actually beneficial to me. It was someone who either stopped working out and they didn't want to take up my time. And they says it'd be a waste of time to test me because I haven't done the lifting, I hadn't done the work.
If it was voluntary to enter the program, what's your position on the voluntariness to participate in subsequent or individual testing sessions?
It was always voluntary.
So if a student, say, wanted to test 2 quarters instead of 4, would that have been a problem?
No.
And if somebody entered the program, tested for a period of time, and then wanted to stop, that would have been okay?
That would have been okay.
You indicated that when you developed the program over time, that you got some limited assistance from others. You mentioned a former coach. Can you take us back to that point?
Sure. In that 1990s time period, a gentleman by the name of Don McCauley was a Olympic-trained strength coach. And I ran by a lot of my ideas by him, though I'm not sure what his background was in relationship to body fat and stuff like that. But we would talk about strength. We would talk about things that would make athletes better, areas we could test.
Other than Don McCauley, did you ever get any assistance from anyone else at any point in time for purposes of developing the program?
For the actual program, it was mostly Don McCauley. You'd hear from different coaches doing different things, but it was Don McCauley had the most interest or involvement in me designing the program.
In a few minutes, we're going to pull up the spreadsheets and show those to the jury and go through them. Did you develop all of the spreadsheets that they're going to see today on your own?
I did.
Did you have the assistance of anyone else for purposes of developing the spreadsheets?
I did not.
What motivated you to develop this program in the first place?
It was to give an athletes a competitive advantage. It was a way for them to test, we would see how strong they were getting, what their body fat was, if their flexibility was good or needed work. And ultimately, when you develop any kind of program, if you have success in it, kids see results, it builds confidence. So as you're building confidence as you go, kids are doing better.
You mentioned something last week on Friday about your coaching philosophies. Can you reiterate those?
Yeah, I was a firm believer, and still am, a firm believer in the fact that you want well-conditioned athletes.
What does that mean, well-conditioned?
That means that you are in tip-top shape. So at the end of a game, when it's the fourth quarter in football or fourth quarter now in basketball, you have more drive. Your ability to, I always say your ability to focus on the court, to be able to run the plays, and your concentration is not being affected at all by fatigue because you put yourself in a position where you're in such good shape. There is a famous saying that, fatigue makes cowards out of all of us. So I was always a firm believer if we got to the end of that game and we were in the tip-top shape. And while everybody else was, panting away and couldn't catch their breath, we could. And then when the game came down to the line and you had tie game, 10 seconds left, your guys had enough focus because they're already conditioned to be successful.
Does this suggest that the success of a basketball player or a team is as much reliant on skill, dribble, shooting, defense, as it is in physical endurance and physical condition?
Yes, you need the conditioning. Obviously, the more talented the players have for those basketball skills will help you tremendously. But if you're a conditioned team, you will be in every game, and you will also be able to keep other people from scoring, which is one of my other big things as a coach I would push.
So here's my question, and maybe this is just me, not being a player, but you weren't coaching the Celtics or some top-notch basketball PC team. Why did you care so much for these high school kids, if you will?
I've never been a trophy guy first, that everybody gets a trophy. I've always been, if you're going to keep score, we're playing to win. I've always believed that. And, to me, it's like the Celtics. For these kids, this is their high school career. At the end of their high school career, they'll probably never play basketball again. Some will be fortunate to go on. But to me, it was important. If I was going to put time and effort in, and they were going to put time and effort in, we should be trying to achieve the highest result possible.
Speaking of time and effort, there was some discussion amongst some of the athletes, both those that the state called and even some that Mr. McDonald spoke to last week, that they said that you were obsessed with stats or with numbers. What does that mean?
So, particularly stat-wise, I had a system where we knew who the most valuable player on the team was, but it wasn't by points. You would get 2 points for a rebound, 2 points for a steal. You would get -2 points if you turn the ball over. So there was a whole formula that we would use to calculate every game to see who the best player on the team was. Because if you weren't a great scorer, but you were a great defender, you could still, in my eyes, score points. So I did have a lot of stat programs like that, kept regular stats that most people do. But it wasn't just about points. It was to always give everybody the chance to kind of be in the limelight. And I've had many kids that went through the program that were great defenders. And they didn't contribute offensively, but they were great defenders. And by doing that, we always had a chance to win.
When you say the best player on a team, do you mean your teams, freshman, JV, and varsity? Do you mean teams of other schools, or both?
We were shooting to be the best in the state. And obviously the best player on our team, but also one of the best players in the state.
But when you said you were checking stats to give these points, if you will,
Yeah.
to hone in on who's the best player, was that North Kingstown player or player from another school?
That was North Kingstown's players.
What, if anything, did you do to maintain stats on other schools?
So other schools, the Providence Journal would provide all the box scores for every game. So you could track how many points people were scoring, who was the best free throw shooter, who was the best three-point shooter. So I would scout and prepare before we played somebody. And that knowledge would be given to the players usually the day before, but also right before the game in the locker room, we would go over the keys to victory.
The state's witness who testified earlier in the trial, who helped you coach, do you remember? He talked about you being out when you got suspended.
Yes.
He had to rise to the occasion and
He did.
coach the team. He mentioned something about you putting time and effort into the coaching, even when you were on official suspension. Can you address what that was all about?
Yeah, so I made a commitment to the team. That's always been my philosophy, that I was always going to put them in the best situation possible. When I was removed, and I believe it was Coach Gormley took over, I provided whatever notes I had. That night when I left, I had taken all my basketball stuff with me, all my scouting notes on the upcoming team. I believe the email was about Cranston East, which was a team that was coming up, what defenses they played, what presses they ran, who their best player was, so he could go in and give the team a fighting chance, is what I would call it. You know, we always had scouting reports. Different coaches would go out and scout. We'd use the Providence Journal's information. Now there's all things where you put all your stats online too. Trying to give the best possible opportunity for my players to be successful.
When you said go out and scout, you mean going to watch other schools play?
Correct.
To make observations of their players, how well they do, offense, defense, etc.?
Yep, who gets down when they miss a shot and who keeps playing, exactly.
Gorman said something about you breaking down video. What did that mean?
So we were one of the first in Rhode Island, because we were doing it in the 1990s, breaking down video with my background. And then there's actually a product now called Huddle that you can get. I think almost every high school has it. The Booster Club purchases a subscription for the school, and you can put your film up on Huddle. And what that means is you can go through and watch your game after you played it from your own home. And you can make your own highlight film if you want. Other teams put their games up. I trade games with other schools. If I had a friend who was a coach of the Wesley High School, and if he was playing a particular team that I had played, I would share my film with him. So a lot of hours went into the scouting. If you couldn't get to a game, you could also get video.
So the breaking down the video is like a virtual way of scouting the game.
Correct.
Got it. Let's talk about the procedures or methods that were in place by which students got involved in the overall testing program. Tell us how the initial introduction would be made, or the ways an initial introduction would be made if somebody was to enter the program.
So basketball players, as I said, I believe on Friday, that I learned a long time ago from an athletic director that in a cut sport, offer it to everyone. So no one can come back and say it wasn't offered to them. So I would traditionally offer it in an email. We had 2 meetings. There was always a meeting at the beginning after the team was picked in November, December. That was your preseason meeting. It was required by the school to have that meeting. I would mention it then. And at the end of the year, there was an award ceremony. And at that meeting, I would also mention it again. If people who were interested in getting involved in the testing program, they could contact me.